Bul dia díobh, agus fáilte go dtí, Terra Incogweirdo mocharchas. Hello, and welcome to Terra Incogweirdo, my friends. I'm so happy you decided to join us today for episode 29, the sanguine history of Leap Castle, or Shanclen Léim Uí Bhánáin. And tune in hopefully next week for part 2, the hauntings of Leap Castle. And there's been a lot of research going into these, and these two videos are taking way longer than I thought. So hopefully I will have part 2 for you next week. Okay, I have my glasses weirdly rucked up so I can read my notes. Okay, but before we tuck in, I would really like to thank everyone who participated in last week's premiere. Chatters and lurkers alike, all are welcome here in Terra Incogweirdo, the land where para is normal. Okay, so a note on pronunciations. I'm going to sort of switch back and forth between giving you standard English pronunciations and also be throwing in some Irish pronunciations in the Munster dialect. Take into consideration that I am a student of Irish and I would not be relying upon the veracity of my pronunciations. If my tutor is watching, perhaps he will assist us all by correcting me. Okay. So let's get started, shall we? Ooh, looky. Leap Castle in a lightning storm. Alright. So Leap Castle, or Shanclen Léim Uí Bhánáin, which translates to the castle of the Leap of the Uí Bhánáins, is located approximately 3.7 miles north of the town of Roscrea in County Offaly within the province of Leinster, also known as Léim, in central Ireland. Archaeological findings indicate that this site has been consistently occupied since the Neolithic period, circa 7000 to 1700 BCE. So according to archaeological research, Léim Uí Bhánáin was built upon the ruins of an Iron Age, possibly Druid ritual site as early as 500 BCE. So the Druids were doing their thing up there on the rock. Evidence also points to the existence of an earlier habitation prior to the construction of the main keep, which stands today at the center of the Uí Bhánáin Castle. So that would be this section right here. That's the keep, and all the stuff on either sides and the outer buildings were added later on. Okay. And this is a really old photo of Leap. I'm not sure, I think this was taken in 1919 by an Uí Bhánáin descendant. Okay, so the construction of the main tower or keep is attributed to the Uí Bhánáin clan circa 1250 AD. So that's been there for quite a while, people. The Uí Bhánáins were the secondary chieftains of the area under the ruling Uachtaráin clan. Just in case you're wondering, and you're probably not, Ban means white in Irish, and I'm assuming that Bhánáin is probably giving us the plural. So Uí Bhánáin probably means whites if you were to translate it into English. And again, maybe my tutor will correct me if I'm wrong about that. Okay. And this is the Uí Bhánáin crest. Let's take a closer look at it, shall we? Let's zoom in and look at it closer. Okay. Lovely, lovely. Alright, how did Léim Uí Bhánáin get its name? Alright. Legend relates that a very common occurrence in the life of a clan transpired when two Uí Bhánáin brothers contested the chieftainship. Only the bravest, most courageous clansmen could hold the title. Therefore, an ordeal to challenge the mettle of the contestants was devised. Okay, so it's my assumption. Usually the clan druids would be the ones to come up with any kind of challenge to determine chieftainship of the clan. So that's my guess, that the druids came up with this challenge. So the boulder outcropping that you're seeing right here, whereupon the Uí Bhánáin keep would one day stand, was selected as the site for this champions contest. Imagine standing here on this hilltop, shown in this photo, and witnessing the valor of these two brothers as they flung themselves from the face of these rocks over and over again until quite literally only one of them was left standing to claim the right of chieftainship for Clan Uí Bhánáin. So we're getting a pretty bloody start here, and most people want to say that the druids conducted ritual sacrifices here, but as far as I know, there's absolutely no evidence that that occurred. Okay, so this legend is so compelling in the minds and imaginations of those who heard and recounted it that even though Léim Uí Bhánáin was much longer in the possession of the storied and bloody O'Carroll clan, the name Lep of the Uí Bhánáins remains to this day. And people, I know it looks like I should be pronouncing it Leap, but I assure you, because my tutor has corrected me so many times, that it is in fact Lep and not Leap. The Uí Bhánáins are given credit for the building of the keep at Lep, which still stands to this day, and we can see the back of it right here. Okay. Alright, so here is a map, current day map of the area. Alright, so from ancient times, the site of Léim Uí Bhánáin was important for its strategic vantage point, guarding a critical pass through the Shlef Blum. Now, Shlef means mountains in Irish, so to say the Shlef Blum mountains would be to say the Blum mountains. Okay, so let's just call them the Shlef Blum. Okay, and as you can see, here's Lep down here, and I'm fairly certain that right here is the pass that they're talking about. So the O'Carrolls, we pronounce it O'Carroll, or O'Carroll would be the Irish pronunciation, were the primary ruling clan in the area known as the Íl O'Carroll, which stretched west from the Shannon River to the centrally located Shlef Blum. Okay, so here's a map of the Íl O'Carroll. Okay, so Lep is approximately right here above Roscrea, and the pass would be around here. There's a smaller little spur of mountains right here. Okay. Lep was and is known as one of the most fortified keeps in all of Ireland. Accordingly, by 1500 AD, the O'Carrolls had seized complete control of Lep Castle and massacred any and all Uí Bhánáins who contested the takeover. So the murders continue and amp up. It's rumored that the O'Carrolls repurposed an interior safe storage room. It was used by the Uí Bhánáins as a safe room and as a storage room within the keep to dispose of these Uí Bhánáin remains. The repurposing of this room will be discussed later on in length. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Fitzgeralds. All right, and here is Gerald Fitzgerald the 9th Earl of Kildare. Get ready, they're all named Gerald. The Fitzgeralds, the Earls of Kildare, attempted to seize Leap Castle on 2 occasions. As the Earls Fitzgeralds primarily have the first name of Gerald, the timelines have become a bit tangled. Many of the histories report that it was the Wizard Earl who was known to be a practitioner of magic, also sometimes called an alchemist. So many histories report that it was the Wizard Earl of Kildare who attempted to seize Leap in 1513 and again in 1516. However, the Wizard Earl was in fact the 11th Earl Kildare and was not born until 1523, so accordingly it could not have been him. However, I could not locate any references, so we're just going to assign that tidbit to mistaken history. So the first attempt by the Earls Kildare was made in 1513, and it appears that both the 8th Earl Kildare, Gearóid Mór, aka Garrett the Great, and the soon-to-be 9th Earl, this dude right here, Gearóid Og MacGaralt, which translates to Garrett the Young, son of Garrett. They were both present on this first attempt. During this expedition, Gearóid Mór, the 8th Earl Kildare, was wounded on the banks of the River Greesh. In Irish, that would be on Greesh, at Kilkea. He was taken back to Kildare, where he died from his wounds on or about September 3rd, 1513, making his son the 9th Earl of Kildare. So Gearóid Og MacGaralt, the 9th Earl Kildare, attempted another takeover again in 1516 and demolished sections of the castle at that time. But by 1557, the O'Carrolls had re-established complete control over Leap. And again, the Fitzgeralds wanted Leap for its strategic location. And this is a rendering of the O'Carroll. Sorry, I keep saying O'Carroll. It's O'Carroll. U is spelled U-I with an accent over the I. This is O'Carroll. Okay, apologies for that. And yes, that's the O'Carroll crest. Sean, aka John O'Carroll, was likely the first Prince of Eel to rule from Leap, and he is given credit for the early construction that added onto the existing keep. Sean is reported to have died at Leap suffering from the plague, and the exact type of illness is not specified. Now, having an extremely far-flung established sea trade network, Ireland has seen more than its share of epidemics over the centuries, including and not limited to bubonic plague, leprosy, pox, aka smallpox, yellow plague, typhus, cholera, dysentery, and more. I mean, Ireland has been ravaged by plague and also famine, as we all know. So it is my contention that the famous elemental of Leap Castle, whom we will talk about later in detail in part 2, may in fact not be an elemental at all, but actually the ghost of Sean O'Carroll, whose person was reportedly ravaged by the mortifications of the plague. His ghost could very well manifest with the accompanying symptoms that they ascribe to the elemental of rotting, putrid flesh falling off of the bone, gray, scaly skin, as well as a smell of decomposition. Okay, so as again I said, we will talk about that more in part 2. Sean O'Carroll, the father of, Sean, the one we're talking about, who had the plague, he was the father of the great Mulroney, who is arguably the most stable ruler the O'Carrolls ever had. Sean died in the year 1489 without naming a successor, and it led to a long, violent period of leadership dispute in Clan O'Carroll, as you will see. Okay, so the great Mulroney was the clan leader after Sean, and prepare yourself, guys, for many Mulroneys to come. The historic record reports that the great Mulroney ruled wisely for 42 years and died in the year 1532. Mulroney was allied with the Butlers, Earls of Ormond, enemies of the Fitzgeralds of Kildare, and this alliance is going to change back and forth over the history of the O'Carroll clan. Now, the great Mulroney himself died without naming an heir. Okay, and just for a moment, I just want to go back to his father, Sean. Now, you get much conflicting information. In places I found that the great Mulroney was named heir by Sean, and other places I see that it says that the leadership dispute started with Sean. However, I think that information is a little suspect, and we're going to leave it up in the air, but it is certain that the great Mulroney himself died without an heir, and his heirs were Ferrigananum, who was illegitimate, and it is interesting if you break down his name. Fer means man, gan means without, and Adam means name. So, man without a name, the illegitimate son to the great Mulroney, was the one who took over. So, besides Ferrigananum, the great Mulroney's children were also Hilia, Grania, and Mora. Okay. All right. Let's look at a different picture, shall we? Let's move it along. The O'Mulloy crest. We're going to talk about the O'Mulloys, or O'Malley, or O'Mulloy, not to be confused with the O'Malleys. Okay, I'm going to get to that in a minute. So there's a legend that Ferrigananum murdered a guest at the table in his dining hall, and the guest servant was then killed in the guard room by Ferrigananum's steward. Ferrigananum switched alliances and participated in marauding with the Fitzgeralds of Kildare against their previous allies, the Butlers of Ormond. Historic records agree that Ferrigananum was killed in the area of Clonelisk, south of Ballybrit, in the year 1541 while raiding with the Fitzgeralds. Conflicting reports lay the murder at the feet of both the O'Mulloy clan as well as the O'Malley clan. Okay, so this is the O'Mulloy crest and this is the O'Malley crest. Although these two clans, their surname shares a similar root, they are in fact not related. Reports indicated that members of Ferrigananum's own extended O'Carroll family conspired in his murder. Likely, these were O'Carroll relations centered at Birr Castle. And this type of murderous back and forth will become a frequently repeated trope in the history of the O'Carrolls. Ferrigananum's heirs. Okay, this again took a bunch of delving because I found several different lists, and I think I may have merged them into one complete list. Okay, so his eldest was Thaddeus the priest. second eldest, Terraincogweirdo, or Terra the One-Eye. He was blind in one eye. Oh, and he is the person that my protagonist in my book, Esme Down, is based off of. This Terraincogweirdo, the One-Eye. The third son was William or William the Pale. There may have been, the fourth son may have been another Mulroney, but that's the one that sometimes shows up and sometimes doesn't. And then the youngest son appears to be Anthony, but sometimes I believe I'm seeing it listed in Gaelic as Oanahe or Uanhe. Or also Uasane. So I think, yeah, we're going to say that that's Anthony, okay? So Ferragananum is succeeded by his eldest son, Thaddeus, the priest, and in a famous incident, okay, let's look at the chapel in Lep Castle. This incident happened in this room. In a famous incident in 1541, thereabout, Tege is said to have murdered his older brother Thaddeus while he performed mass in this chapel at Lep. Tege came into the chapel during mass and ran Thaddeus through with his sword. Thaddeus bled out and died on the altar, people. Forever after, this place is known as the Bloody Chapel, and we will be having some stories about that in part 2. Historians are giving 3 possible alternate reasons for this murder. Perhaps Tege wanted to challenge the clan chieftainship and needed to get rid of Thaddeus so that he could become the clan chief. Could have been because of political disagreement over Thaddeus's attempts to re-establish ties to the Butlers, Earls of Ormond. And again, you're going to see this, as I said before, them ping-ponging back and forth between the Ormonds and the Kildares. Or potentially, the murder may have happened because offense over Thaddeus starting mass before Tege had entered the chapel. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but back in the day, that could have been a problem. Okay. So Terraincogweirdo takes control of Lep and Clan O'Carroll after he murders his brother. But in short order, and I do mean short order, within the same year, Tege is murdered by his kinsman Cahir O'Carroll in the same year, 1553. Tege's son, Tege has a very young son, of course named Mulroney, but he's not old enough to rule yet, so the murderous family infighting continues. Okay. And I love this door knocker because I think it really encapsulates, here it is, there it is, it really encapsulates that O'Carroll feel. The current owner, Sean Ryan, calls this knocker the enter those who dare door knocker. And yeah, I think it's a pretty rad door knocker. I don't know if they know how old it is. So, in retribution for Tege's murder, he is murdered by Cahir in 1554. Alright, and by now the O'Carroll Kingdom of Eel has been garrisoned by the British ruling family, the Tudors, so this whole period of the English takeover is really winding up. This is an extremely unsettled period in the history of Ireland. So that is by 1557, the garrisoning of Ireland is happening. By 1567, William Orr is offered a barony. Okay. by Queen Elizabeth I. And this barony, the formation of this barony, is thwarted by pressure exerted by the Butlers, Earls of Ormond. Okay, so more back and forth between these guys. Okay, so I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. I missed this tidbit of information. Another murder. It's easy to skip over them. So, the year after Tege is killed by Cahir is murdered by Tege's brother, William, or William the Pale, and William becomes the head of Clan O'Carroll at Leap Castle. Okay, so that's when the garrisoning starts of Irish lands. And then in 1567, William's offered the barony, and the Butlers make sure that it doesn't happen. Okay, so funny. I know some Butlers, and I'm almost positive. And I know O'Carrolls, too, and there's a lot of these people living in my birth state of Maryland, and I'm almost positive that they are related to these people. So between the years of 1576 and 1578, William formally surrenders Clan O'Carroll lands and holdings to the crown and accepts an official re-grant of the territory. So this is when Ireland is becoming English territory. In 1581, William is killed by an O'Connor relation who are aligned with the Butlers of Ormond. And William's own son, another John/Sean, is rumored to have been complicit in his father's murder. Just a note on the name Sean. It's often rendered as John, but my understanding is Sean is not a direct translation of the English name John. My understanding is that Ian is way closer to John than Sean is, and I believe in Irish it's spelled E-O-I-N, so Owen. And in Scottish Gaelic, which is another branch of Gaelic, it is spelled I-N-I-A-I-N. Not pronounced that way. It's more pronounced like Jan, like J-A-N, like Jan, J-A-N, like the Norwegian Norse Jan. It's more pronounced like that. Okay. Information about Sean, John, and Anne that maybe you didn't care about, but you got it anyway. Okay. So, all right, where were we? Right. So William's killed by O'Connor relations, and William's heirs. Get ready. Tege, Mulroney, John Sean, Charles Cahir. All right, John Sean, same name. Sometimes it's called John, sometimes it's called Sean. Charles Cahir, same name. Okay. Sorry, their names keep repeating. There's nothing I can do about it. I apologize. All right. This is the front of Leap Castle right here. Okay. So in 1582, John Sean takes charge, but later in the same year, he is murdered by his cousin Mulroney. Okay, now this Mulroney is the young son of Tege Cuiacht, who was too young to rule when his father was killed in 1554. It's the best way I can kind of delineate these people for you, is to remind you of the history, to try to place them in your mind. So in the same year, in quick succession, John Sean's murder is avenged when Mulroney, son of Tege Cuiacht, is killed by John's brother, yet another Charles O'Carroll. Okay. Thank God I have this all written down, because who could ever keep all this in their head, except maybe a new Carol. I don't know. So there were two other contenders for the clan chieftainship at this time, but they were also murdered, ending up making Charles O'Carroll the head of the clan. Okay, so in 1584, Charles O'Carroll is knighted by this dude, Sir Henry Sidney, Lord Justice of Ireland. He looks quite proper in his crenellated collar and his fancy man hat. Okay, so in 1591, in order to protect the ancestral O'Carroll lands from the predation of the Butlers, Earls of Ormond, let's take a look at their crest. I think this crest is carved into the door of Kilkenny Castle. Please, anyone who knows, correct me if I'm wrong. So in order to protect their ancestral lands from the predations of the Butler Earls of Ormond, Charles O'Carroll goes to London in 1591 to pledge allegiance to the crown. And there he signs a document which submits Clan O'Carroll to the rule of primogeniture, or the right of the firstborn male to rule. So supposedly after this point, rulership is a matter of law, supposedly. Okay. All right. So now we're going to cover the period of 1594 to 1603 within the period of Tyrone's Rebellion, or the 9 Years' War. The O'Carrolls stayed loyal to the crown. Accordingly, they did not join Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, in his attempt to drive the British from Ireland. And here is Hugh. And I really thought this was an interesting image. This is a painting of Hugh from a fresco in the Vatican. Interesting, huh? During this time, the Tyrones clashed with the O'Carrolls, the result of which was that a large portion of the homesteads in the O'Carroll territory were burned to the ground. And this is, further like driving a wedge between, the Tyrones and who are the O'Neills, the O'Neill Tyrones, Earls of Tyrone, and the O'Carrolls. During this time, let's see. The arrival. Sorry, the O'Neills, the Tyrones, after burning down the homesteads in the territory of the Eel O'Carroll, they set up a rival O'Carroll as the head of Clan O'Carroll at Lep Castle. Okay. So on several occasions while engaging in battle with the O'Carrolls were said to hire and enlist secondary and tertiary clans as mercenaries to fight for them. So they had the O'Carrolls had a very nasty habit of, rather than paying these hired men, they would bring them back to the castle under the pretext of throwing them a banquet to thank them for their service, and then they would poison them and slit their throats. So the story at this time goes that soldiers from the McMahon clan, another Irish tribe from Moynihan, aided in this battle against the Earl Tyrone in 1599, and as they slept at night after the celebration, they had their throats slit. And these soldiers are all said to haunt the great hall in the castle. Now it's said, and I think we got a McMahon crest. There you go. It's said up to now. again, conflicting reports here. It said up to 150 McMahon and O'Carroll kinsmen were murdered in that incident. So sometimes I've seen 150 O'Carrolls and several McMahon noblemen, and then in another report I saw some O'Carroll kinsmen and 40 McMahon noblemen. So again, 150 kind of sounds like a number that just got blown up over the years. I don't know, that's just my take. I think I'd be more willing to accept the 40 nobles being slain plus several O'Carroll kinsmen at that point. So by 1600, either at the hands of these angry McMahons or at the hands of the rival O'Carroll set in place by the Earl Tyrone, Charles is murdered. Okay. Murder, 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 murder. These people are good at it. All right. So after the English defeated Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, in 1603, Charles's brother, another Mulroney, was knighted for his service to the crown during the 9 Years' War by this lady on the right, Queen Elizabeth the First. I like this image because this here on the left, this is Grand Animal, and that would be Grace O'Malley, the storied and amazing pirate queen of Ireland, who was causing Queen Elizabeth much consternation during this period in time. Okay, so going back to the O'Carroll history, so Mulroney, who's just been knighted, and 3 others are at this point contesting clan leadership. Okay, but this time, because Charles had agreed, had agreed to the right of primogeniture in 1591 agreement with England, the matter is settled by law for the first time. And Charles and Mulroney's 9-year-old nephew, indeed another John O'Carroll, is named heir of Leap Castle and all of the O'Carroll holdings. This is a lovely photo of Leap with the Schlev of Blom in the background. In 1617, O'Carroll lands were formally open to English settlers. In this year, John turns 21 and marries Eleanor, the great niece of ancestral O'Carroll enemies, the Earls of Ormond. Okay, so as always, love conquers all people. Love brings everyone to the table. And herein ends the bloody age of O'Carroll clan infighting, and it was quite sanguine, was it not? Okay, so in 1629, Leap was officially granted to John O'Carroll and his heirs for loyalty to the crown. During the Irish Confederate Wars, 1641 to 1653, the O'Carrolls turned against the crown and fought once again for the side of the native Irish. Cromwell-led forces prevailed. Speaking of Cromwell, here's his head. How it got embalmed and on a spike is the subject for an entirely other video. This must be his death mask, but I just thought this was pretty amazing, so I threw that in there. So Cromwell-led forces prevailed, and in 1641, ownership of Leap was stripped from Clan O'Carroll. All right. In 1649, so 8 years later, Leap Castle was granted to Crown Loyalist Jonathan Darby in lieu of payment for soldiering. However, Jonathan Darby proved to be the nephew of clan chief Charles O'Carroll, who was murdered in 1600. So, you see, even though he is a British loyalist, he's still a true O'Carroll, which, probably helped, you would think, right? So Jonathan's mother, Finola, was a sister to Charles, and in an infamous story, she fell in love, again, love brings everyone to the table, with this Captain Darby, who had been held at Leap Castle during the years of Tyrone's rebellion. Purportedly, Fiona helped the brash young British officer escape in anticipation of their elopement, and on the way out of the castle they met up with one of Finola's brothers, whom Darby killed in order to effect his escape, and that brother supposedly haunts that stairwell to this very day. Okay, so in 1664, this guy, King Charles I of England, himself not a Catholic, but married to this lady, Catholic Henrietta Marie of France, gives the title back to the O'Carrolls. Okay, in 1667, so 3 years later, once King Charles I of England is executed during the British Civil Wars, and his son, this fancy man, Charles II, takes the throne, restoring Protestantism, and the title and lands of Leap Castle are again returned to the Darby family, by this time specifically Jonathan Darby II. And herein follows a long string of Jonathan Darbys. Okay. By 1689, Jonathan Darby III was in charge at Leap Castle. Now, Jonathan was said to have buried the family treasure throughout the estate of the castle. However, a charge of treason saw him imprisoned in Dublin. He escaped the sentence of being hung and then drawn and quartered, and was released some years later after being pardoned by this guy, William of Orange, seen here at the disastrous Battle of the Boyne. And there will be a story in part 2 about Jonathan Darby III. Okay, Jonathan Darby IV was the next to inhabit Leap Castle. He held the title between 1745 and 1776. His heirs were Jonathan Lovett Darby, Robert Lovett Darby, Henry Desater Darby, John Darby, important to delineate him from Jonathan, Sarah Darby, William Lovett, Verney Lovett, Christopher Darby, and Edward Hawke Darby. Jonathan Darby V maintained the Leap estate until his death in 1802, and he died with no heirs. In 1802, the third Jonathan Darby's second son, Henry Desater, became the Lord of Leap Castle, and here's Henry. Henry had an interesting life. He served long and well in the Royal Navy. He was promoted to Rear Admiral of the Blue in 1804, Rear Admiral of the White in 1805, Rear Admiral of the Red in 1808, Vice Admiral of the Blue in 1810, Vice Admiral of the White in 1811, Vice Admiral of the Red in 1814, Admiral of the Blue in 1819, and was appointed Knight Commander of the Order of Bath in 1820. He had command of the HMS Bellerophon. Does anybody know how to pronounce that word? Sorry. And participated at, see, I can't pronounce English words. And participated at the Battle of the Nile, seen here, against Napoleonic forces in 1789 under Rear Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson. We all knew that guy. This painting of the Battle of the Nile was done by Thomas Whitcomb. Once back at home at Leap Castle, Sir Henry reportedly turned his bedroom into an exact replica of his quarters on board ship, probably due to his very intense career in the Royal Navy. Sir Henry never married, so upon his death in 1823, the Leap inheritance goes to Henry's younger brother, John, born in 1751. And as I said before, he is not to be confused with their older brother, Jonathan Darby V, who died childless in 1802. Believe me, it really confused me. It's very hard to get accurate list of heirs. And this, we're talking 200 years ago. Imagine what it's like to try to get a list of the heirs 500 and 600 years ago. It's crazy. Okay, so in 1860, I had a mistype there. Upon the death of John Darby, the estate at Leap goes to John's son, William. William himself had only one son who died young, so accordingly, Leap Castle and its lands were inherited in 1872 by William's grandson, another Jonathan. His middle name's Charles, so we'll call him Jonathan Charles Darby, okay? All right, so in 1889, Jonathan Charles Darby marries this lady, Mildred Dill, okay? Now, you may have heard of Mildred. Mildred was a Gothic author who wrote under the nom de plume Andrew Mary, or Andrew. Depends on where you come from. Andrew, Mary. All right, so Mildred and a group of her occult friends begin to conduct seances at Leap. Here's a picture of Mildred in the front hall, probably between 1910 and 1919. All right, this picture was probably taken within that time period. So it's said that in combination with all the renovation efforts, that stirs up spirits, in combination with these seances and renovation efforts, it's said to have stirred up the literal plethora of spirits that haunt Leap to this very day. If I haven't said it before, Leap has been called more than once the most haunted castle in Ireland, and holy cow, that's got to be saying something, right? Okay, January 1922 brings us to the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Here's a signature page. And this established an independent Irish free state within British Empire holdings in Ireland. Was narrowly ratified 64 to 57 in the Irish Parliament, which is known as the Dáil, the Dáil, in January of 1922. Here's a photo of the Irish delegates. There they are. Its aim was to solidify the terms of peace after the 1921 truce in the Irish War of Independence. The terms required members of the Dáil and the Senate, to swear an oath of allegiance to the crown. Northern Ireland was given the option to remain a part of the British Empire, and this led to the division of Ireland, which still stands as the airing of this video in March of 2025. The Irish Republican Army, also known as the IRA, formed in 1919, was the successor to the nationalist organization, the Irish Volunteers, which was founded in 1913. The Anglo-Irish Treaty split the members of the IRA into pro- and anti-treaty factions, leading to the disastrous Irish Civil War that took place between June 1922, May, and 1923. So how did this affect Lepp? Let's find out. Love this picture. Lepp in the snow. In March of 1922, the Darbys relocated to England after receiving several threats and warnings. Okay. People loyal to Great Britain were probably in a lot of danger in Ireland during this time. Lepp Castle was left to its caretaker, Richard Dawkins, who was living in the castle with his wife and baby. Here's another photo of Lepp. And this is the southeast side, and there's the infamous rock. The Lepp of the O'Bannons occurred. Okay. Alright, so in the early morning hours of July 30th, 1922, the Dawkins family were awakened by insistent loud banging on the castle's front entry. Mr. Dawkins leaned out of an upper window, and there were several men below yelling up at him that they desperately required lodgings for the evening. Mr. Dawkins is drawn down to the front door, and as he opens it, he is held at gunpoint by 11 men with their faces covered so he couldn't identify them. And he was informed that these men that they were about to burn the castle. After explaining to them that his family was inside, the 11 men allowed Dawkins 20 minutes to remove his family, after which they entered into the castle, began breaking furniture and other valuables prior to spreading petrol and putting a torch to the castle. This is the north side of Lepp. The following morning, the central keep was still mainly intact, and Dawkins set about trying to reclaim valuables that escaped the fire. He put them all in an outer storage building and set about moving his family out of the castle and into the unharmed gatehouse. But later that day, that outer storage building and the burned out parts of the castle were looted by members of the local populace. This is a photo of Lepp after it was burned. You can see kind of the windows are open. It's looking kind of sad, lonely, and forlorn. Pardon me. The same incident was repeated during the early morning hours of July 31st, 1922, and the surviving southern portion of the castle was set on fire. Very little was recovered from the second act of arson, and Dawkins and his wife were derided by the locals when they asked them for help in salvage efforts. Rumors abounded as to the identity of the arsonist, while most reports lay the act squarely at the feet of the IRA. Jonathan Darby gave his own opinion in a subsequent newspaper article. Please excuse me, gotta have a coughing fit. Pardon me. Try talking this long sometime, people. It's hard. Okay. Darby claimed that unexploded dynamite had been found in the cellar where the invaders had gotten so drunk that they forgot to ignite it. Darby had no hesitation whatsoever in stating that the locals were responsible for both the burning and subsequent looting. The Darby family never returned to live in the castle after the burning. The lands were sold to local tenant farmers by the Irish Land Commission following compulsory acquisition under the Land Act of 1922. In 1922, after the burning, and I am making an assumption that this occurred as a result of the cleanup after the burning in July, workmen came upon a closed-up dungeon whose entrance was accessed through a small door in the side of the bloody chapel above the dining hall. So, here is the door that is the entrance to this dungeon that had been secluded. Thought to have originally been used as an interior safe room and or storage room, as I previously told you, by the Uí the murderous O'Carrolls devised a more sinister use for this space. The opening had been narrowed to create a bottleneck. Here's a photo of the opening at an oblique angle, and you can see the construction to make this opening smaller. And the hidden room was transformed into a dungeon famously known as the Oubliette. Some people think that oubliettes never existed. Not true. There's this one at Lep. Oubliette comes from a French word meaning oublier meaning to forget, excuse me. Both O'Carroll guests and prisoners, alive and dead, were pitched into this dungeon from this bottleneck entry, often directly onto upturned spikes that were sunk stoutly into the ground below. Here's another picture looking down into it, and as you can see, there's still detritus at the bottom. These people were simply left in this dungeon to die of their wounds or from dehydration or starvation, whichever came first. And remember, people, they threw people on top of people, on top of people, on top of bodies, bodies on top of bodies, rotting, dead, alive. Oh my God, what a freaking nightmare. Sorry. It's a nightmare. It made me a little crazy there. Sorry. So, the cruelty of this whole setup, here's another picture with a longer ladder, kind of giving you an idea of how deep it was in there. Okay, so the cruelty is doubly compounded here, people, by the fact that the lower portion of this oubliette shared a wall with a dining hall at Leap Castle. So, these wretched prisoners were forced to listen to the revels of the O'Carrolls as they slowly and horribly expired behind the shared wall. It's just utterly barbaric. It was reported, get ready people, that when the oubliette at Lap was discovered, it was filled with such a staggering number of skeletons, some still suspended on these upturned spikes, that it took the workmen 3 full cartloads to remove all the bones. Wow, that's a lot of spirits. terribly murdered, all crammed into one space. Holy cow! No wonder Leap is the most haunted castle in Ireland. Some speculate that the oubliette was still in use as late as the 1800s, as a pocket watch from this time period was also found inside. Here's the Great Hall. But my thought is that the watch could have just as easily been dropped into the dungeon, as the bones were still filling it in the 1800s. So, like, seriously, who would want to slither down into that death hole to retrieve a dropped item? I know. I sure wouldn't. So I was unable, I think, when I got another picture of the dining hall, I was unable to discover the ultimate resting place of the bones that were found in the oubliette. I was very curious, but I could not find it anywhere. One might assume that they were interred in a local churchyard. You would think so, right? However, given the age and unknown provenance of the remains, it's possible that they were deemed ineligible for burial within a churchyard, and in that case, I guess they would have been buried in what's known as paupers' graves. People who were ineligible for burial within a churchyard would be buried outside of the walls of a church, and usually there was a designated place in each village for such things, and they were called paupers' graves. If anybody knows the answer to this question of where these bones that were found, that were located or found in the oubliette, where they were interred, I would love to know. So please leave it down in the comment section below. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so Leap remained a burned out shell. I'm just going to show you a few of the interior spaces as I talk about this part. It remained a burnout shell until it was purchased in 1974 by Australian historian Peter Bartlett, whose own mother was herself an Uí Bhánáin. He carried out extensive renovations until his death in 1989. We're in the 1900s now. This is a side window, and here are some photos of the interior as it exists today. That's the hearth. It's a painting of a knight on one of the side walls. And this is the minstrel's gallery up here. Right up there. I know, this painting of a lady on the other side. Okay. In 1991, artist and musician Sean Ryan and his wife Anne purchased Leap, and renovations are continuing to this day. And here's the man himself. Sir Sean. I don't think he's a sir, but Sean is a fairly well-known musician in Ireland, my understanding. And the Ryan family maintains a beautiful website for Leap Castle, and it can be found at leapcastle.net, leapcastle, one word, .net. Here is Sean in front of Leap. Hello, Sean. Thank you for taking care of Leap and having it open to the public, because indeed the Ryans have opened Leap Castle to the public and it can be toured. Boy, do I want to go. Monday through Saturday between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. By all accounts, Sean and his family are affable hosts, willing to go above and beyond to bring you a wonderful experience while visiting the Léim Uí Bhánáin Leap Castle in County Offaly, Ireland. You can contact Sean Ryan at phone number +353 868 690 His email is all one word, Sean F. as in Frank F. I don't know if Frank is his middle name, but Sean F. Ryan at outlook.com. And this info will be below in the description. If you would like to go and visit LEP, who wouldn't? I can't wait. Hopefully next time I get across the pond, I will go and visit Sean at LEP Castle. I pray, I hope, and I pray. I love this picture. Beautiful. I don't know if it's like doctored or what, but awesome brooding picture of LEP in a storm. So, guys, I really want to thank you for hanging with this history. I'd like to call it a deep dive, but believe it or not, that was just a swim in the shallow end in the kiddie pool. I very much hope that you enjoyed yourself today, and please come again and return next week for part 2, paranormal activity in LEP Castle. Now that I've given you this historical context, it will help put all of those tales into focus for you. So thank you so much for visiting us today here on Terra Incogweirdo, the land where para is normal. Till next time, don't trip and fall into any oubliettes. And while you're at it, remember to bring the light. Right? I'll see you next time, you beloved, gorgeous Incogweirdos. Here on Terra Incogweirdo, the land where para is normal. Sun go fall, you very gorgeous and beloved people. We'll see you next time.